in Chapter 26 of the Town of Danvers General Bylaw, the Wetlands Protection Bylaw. What we'll do is, after I go through a whole script we need to read about remote meetings, we'll get into our agenda. And how it works is, after the applicant presents his or her request and the board has had time to ask questions and discuss the project, we will accept questions from the audience. Because this is a public meeting, it is required by law that you give your name and address first. Bottom line is, although we may disagree on the issues raised, all persons present during this meeting are expected to be civil to all other meeting attendees. This includes the members of the commission, staff, abutters, concerned citizens, and property owners and project applicants. Going forward, I'm going to start with a roll call of the members of the commission. Vanessa Curran.
Present.
Michael Splain.
Yeah.
Ann McGill.
Here.
Chelsea King.
Here.
Our alternates, Ken Wally and Joe O'Donnell and Peter Wilson here. Staff, when I call your name, please respond in the affirmative. Georgia Pendergast.
Here.
David Fields.
Present.
Alicia Linehan.
Present.
Anticipated speakers on the agenda, please respond when I call your name.
Audio.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Robert Glendon for 20 Brentwood Circle.
Bob, you can go ahead. I had you muted. Why don't you try again?
Okay,
Bob Glendon?
I'm here.
Mark Spear and attorney Peter Arbonantes, 55 Wenham Street.
Here.
And hopefully I pronounced your name correctly, Peter. We also have interested residents sign up to speak on the 55 Wenham Street matter. We will call on those interested in participating when we open for public discussion for that agenda item. Just an introduction to the remote meeting rules. This open meeting of the Danvers Conservation Commission is being conducted remotely, consistent with Governor Baker's executive order of March 12, 2020, due to the current state of emergency in the Commonwealth due to the outbreak of the COVID-19 virus. In order to mitigate the transmission of the COVID-19 virus, we have been advised and directed by the Commonwealth to suspend public gatherings, and as such, the governor's order suspends the requirement of the open meeting law and to have all meetings in a publicly accessible physical location. Further, all members of public bodies are allowed and encouraged to participate remotely. The order which you can find posted, this order which you can find posted on the town's website allows public bodies to meet entirely remotely so long as reasonable public access is afforded so the public can follow along with the deliberations of the meeting. Ensuring public access does not ensure public participation unless such participation is required by law. This meeting will feature public comment. For this meeting, the Conservation Commission is convening remotely via the WebEx app, as posted on the town's website, identifying how the public may join. Please note that this meeting is being recorded and that some attendees are participating by video conference. Accordingly, please be aware that other folks may be able to see you and take care not to screen share your computer. Anything that you broadcast may be captured by the recording. Meeting materials. Supporting materials have been provided members of this body and will be shown during this transmission. The public is encouraged to follow along using the posted agenda items unless I note otherwise. Meeting business ground rules. We are now going to turn to the first item on the agenda. Before we do so, permit me to cover some ground rules for effective and clear conduct of our business and to ensure accurate meeting minutes. I will introduce each speaker on the agenda. After they conclude their remarks, the chair will go down the line of members, inviting each by name to provide any comment, questions, or motions. Please hold until your name is called. Further, please remember to mute your phone or computer when you are not speaking. Please remember to speak clearly and in a way that helps generate accurate minutes. For any response, please wait until the chair yields the floor to you and state your name before speaking. If members wish to engage in colloquy with other members, please do so through the chair, taking care to identify yourself. For items with public comment, we have established an email address for public comment. Public comments at danversmass.gov. This email address is shown online with the streaming of this meeting. Residents may email comments and they will be provided/read out loud after staff has confirmed that their name and address is valid. All email must contain the date and the phrase Conservation Commission in the subject line. We've also established a phone line for public comments. You may call 978-777-001, extension 2 to provide comment. Finally, each vote taken in this meeting will be conducted by roll call vote. All that being said, we're going to proceed to the first item on our agenda, which is a request for a certificate of compliance for 20 Brentwood Circle, DEP file number 14-1343. I think the first thing we'll do is go to Bob Glendon and just have his comments on it, and then we'll just turn it over to the members to ask any questions.
Okay, hi, this is Bob Glendon here. First, I'd like to just thank Georgia and the Conservation Commission for the help throughout this process. I sent Georgia the WP8 form along with the letter from William Manuel stating that all of the items were completed in compliance with the order of conditions. The concrete was removed, the erosion barriers are still in place, the fill was clean fill, and then there was hydro-seeded and the grass has come up excellent. So we have a good root supply there. And I also included pictures along with the original site survey to show what actually had happened. And I feel that, you know, we've done a good job, and it's a pretty clear case for bringing, you know, this lot actually closer back to nature without the pool, and that we should have, hopefully we can have sign off from the commission tonight.
Okay, I'll set them. Okay, one thing I'm reading here, Bob, is that one of our requirements for a certificate of compliance is an as-built plan. And from what I'm reading in George's narrative, you have not provided one because there really wasn't much built, right? It's just a question of removing.
Correct. It was really just filled in. So I talked with Bill Manuel in detail about this. Said, Bill, is this something I should do? He says, like, honestly, Bob, this is probably an oversight. We should have kind of gone over this when we, you know, did the order of conditions. With something like this, you're not really building anything, and he really didn't feel it was necessary. You know, I spoke to Georgia about it, and she said, I suggest you consult with Bill and see what he feels. So I did, and Bill said, honestly, I really don't think that this is for what you have actually done here. If you provide pictures and show the original plan, it really, it's an expense that you really shouldn't have to incur. And it was probably my oversight to kind of like miss that when the original order of conditions was filed.
Okay, and Georgia, you've been out to the site, correct? And you've seen receipts that the material has been disposed of as we requested?
Correct. And I went out there earlier and the grass has established.
Okay, and erosion control is still there? Or?
Correct. The erosion control is still in place as well.
Okay. Those are the only real two questions I have. I just, personally, I could waive the as-built plan, but if other members of the board feel that it's required, I'm open to their opinion on it. So I guess I'm going to poll the members and just ask for comments, questions, and then we'll proceed from there. So the first I'll ask is Mike. Mike, you're muted.
I'm muted. Let me unmute. Am I unmuted now?
Yes, you are. Yeah.
Good, thank you. Georgia, what would we expect an as-built to show in a case like this? Basically, he removed some concrete and buried a pool and planted a lawn, correct?
Correct. So the as-built would show evidence that the pool was removed. So if you were to compare the proposed and the as-built, you would see evidence that that pool area that was once there is now a grassed area, and that's certified by an engineer
Yeah.
that that has occurred.
So there is some documentation that a significant amount of the pool was removed, right?
Correct. That he provided those receipts. I think it was about 3 truckloads, Bob. I can't recall exactly.
Correct. There's 3 truckloads. Correct.
All right, well, I don't think we should be requiring an as-built on something when nothing was built. We're talking about a pool removal. And that's going to be remain as a lawn now, is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay, that's all I have.
Okay, thanks, Mike. Ann? You have to unmute, Ann.
There we go. Just one other question or comment here. It talks about utility locations, and as I recall from the original presentations, there weren't any utility locations in that site. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay. Okay. And I'm just delighted that the concrete was removed. I remember that, remember that discussion. Okay.
It's actually,
that's all I
the
have.
pool was old. The pool
Yeah.
was old, and it's a beautiful lawn now. It really is gorgeous.
It looks
just the
great.
whole lawn goes back. Just abuts the conservation land. It's gorgeous, and I'm very happy with the results of it. So
Very good. Very good.
All set, Ann?
Yep.
Okay, Chelsea?
Yeah, no, just looking at the pictures, it looks great. I don't have any comments.
Okay, and Vanessa?
I just want to clarify, based on the prior discussion for the order of conditions, did we stipulate that all the concrete had to be removed or just the parts that were broken up? I'm trying to remember if it was the vertical walls of the pool that were removed, or just the horizontal bottom.
the parts that were broken up needed to be removed.
Okay. So is there any way for it to be known to the future owner of this house, or, a future buyer if the house gets sold, that there is buried concrete on the lot?
I mean, if they ask me, I'm going to tell them when I sell the house. Yeah, that's something I would have to disclose, for sure. And in my seller's disclosure, that's a question that's asked, and I'm going to have to fill that out. So that will be, I guess, disclosed with the seller's disclosure form.
Vanessa will also be tied to the house, and with the deed, we could also have the certificate of compliance specifically written there. And as we did on the order, because I think Peter had mentioned this too, we made it very explicit that the project was the removal of a pool and the fact that there could be remnants of the concrete still remaining in the rear of the yard. So they would have to be proactive in reading through the order and the certificate. But I think that's really the extent as much as the commission can do their authority-wise, trying to put it out there.
Okay.
I agree.
All right. I think I'm otherwise satisfied, and I don't see any objection to not getting the as-built plan. As it was already stated, nothing was actually built.
Okay, is there any public comment? Dave, are there any emails?
There are no emails.
And Elisa, are there any phone comments?
There are no phone comments.
Okay, so Chelsea, I'm sorry. Georgia, the way I see this, we have to vote on 3 different items. We have to waive the certificate, the as-built plan. We have to close the hearing, and we just have to vote on the certificate of compliance. Is that correct?
Yes, we could do that. I mean, yes.
Okay, why don't we do that first? So I guess the first, I need to have a motion and a second that we waive the requirement for an as-built plan. So if someone can make a motion on that, we could proceed.
All right, I'll make a motion. I'll make a motion that we waive the requirement of the applicant filing an as-built plan for 20 Brentwood Circle, DEP file number 14-1343.
Okay, the motion's been made. Is there a second?
I second the motion.
Okay, let me poll the members. Vanessa,
Yes.
Michael,
Aye.
Ann,
Yes.
Chelsea,
Aye.
and Peter, yes. Okay, next up, we need to close the hearing on this particular issue. So if someone can make a motion that we close this hearing.
I'll make a motion that we close the hearing for 20 Brentwood Circle, DEP file number 14-1343.
The motion's been made. Is there a second?
I second that.
Okay.
I'll second the motion.
Okay, let's
seconds.
vote on it. Vanessa,
Yes.
Mike Splain,
Aye.
Ann McGill,
Yes.
Chelsea King,
Yes.
and Peter Wilson, yes. Okay, now we need a motion to issue a certificate of compliance for this particular agenda item.
Peter, I'll make a motion that we, I forgot what I'm making a motion for.
Certificate of compliance.
That we order a certificate of compliance for 20 Brentwood Circle, Department File 14-1343.
Okay, the motion's been made. Is there a second?
I'll second the motion.
Okay, all in favor? Vanessa,
Yes.
Michael? Mike, you in favor?
Aye.
Ann?
Yes.
Hartman? Aye. You hear me?
Yes, we did. We got you.
All right. Thank you.
Chelsea?
Yes.
And Peter, yes. Okay, that closes that item. You're good to go, sir.
I look forward to working with you in the future. Thank you.
Okay, good. Okay,
Good night.
next up is a violation discussion for 55 Wenham Street. I think what we'll do, Georgia, is to ask you to just give us an overview, and then we'll proceed with discussion and questions, and then we'll open it to public comment.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. So I'm just going to share my screen quickly, and I know we have both the property owner here and his representative as well. So let me just, apologies. So these, can everyone see my screen?
Yes.
Is it large enough for everyone to see detail? I realize watching these meetings back, although it's on the screen, it's not that big. So is that a bit better?
Yes, that's good.
That's good. Yeah.
Okay, wonderful. So just as background, we got a neighborhood complaint, and some of this also stemmed with the Zoning Board of Appeals, which I'll leave the representative to give a bit of background on that, as I haven't really been attending those. I have a little bit of background though. So a majority of the complaint we got was operations in the rear of 55 Wenham, as we can see here. Sorry, I'm trying to go to the next photo. Just a second. There we go. So this is our most recent aerial in 2019. So the majority of the suspecting violating activities in the rear of the property. So here's a good example. Again, as I preface in the memo, this is a rough outline that's provided by Oliver, which is the Mass GIS mapping system. A lot of these are done through aerials and flyovers based on water and land coverage. So while this is not an accurate depiction of what may be on land, it does give us a rough estimate, and it did give me enough evidence to prove that there definitely is activity within the buffer zone. So what we see here in the green line is going to be the extent or the edge of the bordering vegetated wetland. And then what is not shown on this map, but this blue line here is what we'll call an intermittent stream. And this blue line does continue through the wetland system. You can almost see this dark line here, and this is a little bit of water down here as well. So you can almost see that natural path. With the topography, I think it does run from down through here, through the street, but I'm not exactly sure.
It runs from the bottom to the top?
Yes, I would have to check the topography. And Mr. Spear may know a little bit better about that site when he speaks. But so just another area you'll see here in yellow. So I'd measured a rough 100-foot buffer. So this dark line in the middle was that 100-foot extent measured directly from the end of the wetland line. So in yellow, you'll see what that rough estimated 100-foot buffer is. And zooming in, you'll see, obviously the activity we see here is that, you know, trees were cleared, impervious surface was put down. I think there's storage of loose materials. There's a number of photos from the Abutters that we've received that I put in the packet that just show storage of materials, sand, gravel, parking of cars. So of course, if this activity were to not be here and it would be something that be proposed, this is something the commission would heavily regulate, review, and condition. In this case, this site has not received an order of condition in the past for this certain activity in this area. So the discussion here from this standpoint, I'll leave it to the commission and then the homeowner to discuss further, but it's a matter of, I think there's something with the ZBA order that's requiring a lot of this material in the back to be pulled out closer but behind another structure. If that's the case, it seems like a lot of things may be outside of the buffer. But I again noted in the memo, I think the most important thing here that I had suggested that the commission do is require that this area be surveyed by a wetland scientist or an engineer, so we can find out exactly the extent of the 100-foot buffer. And in this case, we would also have two buffers. So you have the 100-foot buffer off the green line of the vegetated wetland. And then if this intermittent stream does have bank and bankful qualities, then that would also have a 100-foot buffer. And then of course off that, right now we have our existing 25 and our 35. So if we're going off this measurement, there is substantial alteration in the 25 and the 35. So that being said, that's just background on what I observed when I was asked to look into suspected violation, and it's pretty clear that there is activity in the resource area. So Peter, I'll leave it back to you with what you want to do next.
Okay, I've got a couple quick questions. Refresh my memory, what are the regulations around an intermittent stream? Do we have jurisdiction over that, or is that?
Great.
Good thought.
So the intermittent stream, it's also dependent on what other resource it's associated with. So a lot of times this intermittent stream is going to be associated with this bordering vegetated wetland. And like I had said before, if there is a noticeable bank in that intermittent stream, there's going to be a buffer off that. So there are some requirements under the Act that explicitly call out what makes an intermittent stream. It has to run a certain amount, but there is a buffer zone with intermittent streams. So when they do that delineation, it would be up to the wetland scientists they hire to really delineate that based on soils and other factors.
Okay. Okay. And then I guess I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Spear or his representative, and then I'll start with some questions, and I'll turn it over to the board to ask any further questions. So, Mr. Spear or Mr. Alvanantes, if you have any comments, now's your time to present them.
Oh, you lost me there. I've owned the property since probably 2002, and no vegetation, no trees have been taken down since I've owned the property. The land that you see, I mean, she has a picture of multiple trails out there that are not there anymore. We had a present meeting last week with the town board. Everything down in the southeast corner has been moved away and back behind the barn.
Excuse me, the barn being 55 or 41?
55. 55.
Okay, thanks.
The lot that you see has not changed since I owned it. We haven't taken any trees down. at all. What you see is what was there when I bought the property from my family.
Okay,
And everything basically southeast, all those like just past the row of trees on the right there, everything straight back from to the right is behind the barn now, except for there's a trailer, but it's closer to the barn now. Where we did that, come into agreement with the town for what our variance states that we can use the property for. The variance that we have for the property is we're allowed to use the property 2.5 times size of the barn for outside storage. It's been like that since 1974 when my grandfather got it. It used to be a dairy farm. He got the variance when he closed it. The town gave him a variance to use the land 2.5 times the storage for outside for commercial use. And it's been like that since day one. But we haven't taken down any trees at all or enlarged that property at all since I've owned it.
okay, it's somewhere I saw some video of a tree being cut down. What was that all about?
That's news to me. What video?
So Peter, I think that was correspondence we received from one of the abutters. So maybe I can play that if you wanted to wait till abutter comments.
No, we'll leave that to the abutters. Okay, so I asked about the intermittent stream, and my other question is, how does the zoning work here? I know you've been in front of the ZBA, so I'm sure you're on the up and up there. I just need that from my understanding, because everything around this is all residential, so I'm just curious as to why there's such an industrial use here. So if one of you could comment just to enlighten me more than anything else.
I'm sorry, who was that question to?
To either of you or Mr. Avantis. Like I said, it looks to me like it's pretty much residential around here. I'm not sure what the zoning is. And I know you've been in front of the ZBA, so I'm sure that you're on the up and up. I'm just curious for my own education as to what the zoning is here.
Peter, you got an answer for that? Is Peter on?
I don't think he hears you because he doesn't seem to be responding.
Oh, I know we are in residential 3, but back in 1974, it wasn't residential 3 when my family got the variance to use the property. And ever since then, we've always had the variance on the land, the use of that barn to store product inside the barn and outside the barn.
Okay.
Same with 41 Wenham Street. I mean, they have a variance on their land. We have a variance on ours. It used to be one family owned it all, but then when the family, no, I wouldn't say broke up, but one family bought one barn, one family bought the other barn. They all got variances back in 74, 75, and the town approved it, and we've had them ever since.
And 41 is to the left and closer to the street. Is that right?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Okay, and what's the business there? Is this all your business, or do you rent out the space to other businesses?
It's all rental. Agway up the street at 9 Wenham Street rents 90% of that barn, where he stores his hay, his shavings. I have a excavating company, a small excavating company that used to be down in the southeast corner that's now behind the barn, and a small contractor that rents like a 25 by 20 foot square inside the barn just to store his tools.
Okay.
That's it.
Okay. Before I turn it over to the other members, I'm just thinking we have to have this, we need to know where the wetlands delineation is, and then we'll go from there just to see what our jurisdiction is. And then hopefully we can, we can work with everybody to make everybody happy with each other.
I know. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, I'm all set. So just go ahead.
I know Georgia reached out to Peter, and he mentioned to me, and I've already looked into getting it done. I'm just waiting on this meeting, and we'll go from there. We can get it done.
Okay. And if you're agreeable, it probably wouldn't be a bad idea for us to get out there and just see the piece of property.
That's
And
fine.
Several of us live relatively close by, so it wouldn't be a big deal. Okay, I'm all set, so I'm going to pass it along to the other members to see if there's any further questions or comments. So the first I'll ask is Mike Splain.
Yes, hi. Attorney Avanides, can you hear me? Peter? Can someone unmute Peter Avanides?
I don't think he's muted.
Yeah, it looks like he is unmuted.
Peter Avanides, can you hear me? Can't hear me. Mark, can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Mark Spear?
Yes.
All right. Is your lawyer with you, or is he on another?
He must be at his office or his house.
Yeah. All right. Maybe someone could call him and he can unmute or whatever he's doing. In the meantime, do you know what the nature of you probably have a use variance. Do you know what that use variance allows you to do?
Yes, I do. I have it in front of me. You want me to read it to you, or?
Sure. Yeah. Is it very long?
It is.
Well, can you
Summarize it.
summarize it?
Basically, there's 4 things on it. The applicant is to keep the area neat and orderly in condition,
Yeah.
and that the bond purposes be limited to storage only. No work other than loading and unloading of materials and equipment take place on the premises. That's number 1. Number 2 is the premises not be used for a base of business, which it isn't. The outside storage is to be limited to 2.5 times the floor area of the cement block building. Outside, that basically comes to about 14,000 square feet for outside storage.
Uh-huh.
And all storage is to be behind the building.
And when you got the variance, what was being contemplated? I mean, because the farming was gone, and I understand that, and your granddad or somebody was looking to do something. So what was he contemplating when he got the variance? To do what you're doing, pretty much? Yeah.
They say been like this since 1975. I mean,
Yeah.
my grandfather rented it, and my parents rented it. I'm renting it. I mean,
Yeah. So you were always rented out.
always.
Yeah. And are you agreeable to do the survey?
I am.
You are. Well, I appreciate that. And really, it's hard to ask really without really knowing where we are in terms of the wetland and the buffer and the riparian. It's really hard to ask any more questions, but I'm pleased that you're willing to do that. And I don't know whether we need to go any further now once it's up through Mr. Chairman, but until we actually get that established and a site visit, then there'd be flags there and we could go out and take a look.
Yeah,
I mean,
I agree.
I'm for it. I mean, this is all news to me. I'm sure it would have been news to my father and my grandfather, but it's never come up until now. I know there was a certificate of compliance that my father took care of back in 2000. I don't know if Georgia has it.
But we're responding to a complaint. If I through you, Mr. Chair, but we're responding to a complaint, and that's why you're here, and we're trying to resolve it without any harsh measures. Is what my feeling is. That right, Georgia?
That's correct. So usually the approach in the violation is to first take that administrative approach and ask them to come before the commission unofficially. And the second step being an enforcement order if there can't be an agreement on the commission's suggested approach.
We have a cooperative person here, though, I think.
Yes.
Okay, anything else, Mike?
No, that's it. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Ann, any questions or comments?
Hi, can we make comments now? This is Sue James from 39 Wenham Street.
Once we're through with the members of the board,
Okay.
we'll go to members of the
Thank you.
public.
Thank you.
Ann, do you have any comments? You're muted, Ann, by the way.
I was just wondering, the outside storage of what? When you're talking about, you talked about what's in the barn. What kind of outside storage are you referring to?
Outside storage would be basic materials and equipment.
Okay,
Materials such as, I know we have one trailer out there now, and that's all that's out there. Storage trailer that has hay shavings that Agway
right,
uses.
okay,
And then there's, equipment would be there's 2 or 3 little trucks and some small trailers, and that's it.
okay,
For the excavator to be moved around, for the excavating company.
okay. Thank you. That's all.
Chelsea, any questions, comments?
No, I was gonna ask about the storage thing, so no, I don't have any comments.
Okay, Vanessa.
Thanks. I just want to, so Mr. Spear, you said it was since 2002 that you've owned this property?
I believe so, yes.
Okay, roughly 2002. So since then, has there been any increase in the parking area? Have you laid down any crushed stone or anything to increase the area that could be parked upon?
Not at all.
So it's exactly the same now. The edges of the parking areas is exactly the same now as it was in 2002-ish?
From what I believe, yes. I mean, what happened, I can't see the map. Yeah, what you see there, nothing is increased in size. I mean, when I took over the property, I put a line of rocks up against I think Georgia saw them, I don't know, the whole line of rocks up against the hill before the wetlands, and nothing has changed. T&T excavating, that bottom right-hand corner where that equipment is, where the arrow is now, he's been there since 2002 also. He's been there almost 18 years. And he hasn't done anything. And that, I believe, the certificate of compliance, when my father got in 2000, I wasn't involved in it. That's where it was, and we took care of the compliance, and it's been like that ever since.
Georgia, have you looked back at what the certificate of compliance was, or is that something that we can look at in advance of the next meeting just to determine what that was for?
Yeah, I recall pulling that file, and I believe that certificate of compliance was for a new build of a structure. Mr. Spear, do you recall any work being done over here in this area around that time?
You know, I did my research too, because I didn't know it existed either. And the address was 55 Wenham Street. It could have been for the house that my father put up.
That's what it was. Yeah.
So, all right.
It wasn't any, because I recall wanting to find plans for the specific area and seeing if there was wetland delineations.
Right.
And the only extent I got was for wetlands up in this area and a buffer zone up here. So I think that's what that closeout was for. I don't recall 100%, but I'm inclined to say it was for work in this area.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't know either till I found it. I mean, okay.
And how often are you on site? It sounds like you're renting out the property pretty much fully. So how often would you say you're on site for the property?
Myself?
Yes.
I live in the house right next to it.
Okay. Okay. Just trying to clarify.
Right.
All right. I think that's all I have for now. I agree that it's hard to know what's in the buffer zone without actually knowing the buffer zone. So I agree that it would be extremely helpful to get the wetland delineations done.
No problem.
Okay, thank you. Before I proceed to the abutters, I'm just going to ask if there's any email questions. Dave?
There's nothing at this time.
Any phone call questions, Alicia?
So Alicia's actually actively fielding a phone call right now. I think she's actually been on the phone a while. It would be best if we could maybe do the phone after the public comment so she could catch up, if that's all right with you, Mr. Chair.
That is good. All right, so let's proceed to the public comment of the abutters, and I'm sorry, the name has slipped my mind. So, Sue James.
Yep, Sue James. Yep, 39 Wenham Street.
Okay.
Hi, thanks for taking the time to listen to us tonight.
Sure.
So I wanted to say, as far as the trees being cut down, I sent a video. There's a large tree that actually almost hit me on my property that was cut down. There have been many trees cut down. There's been, I don't know if you've seen a small excavation truck but I haven't because there's multiple trucks in and out of there all day long. And as far as the variance, it's under interpretation now by the zoning board because it's so old. And also, the outside parking, I don't think is allowed either. There's, I don't know how many, no overnight parking is also listed in there, and there's multiple trucks. So there might only be one big trailer right there storing hay, but there's excavation trucks. They've laid down cement, they've laid down huge rocks, they've laid down crushed stone. You can see through the woods now, and we were never able to see through the woods. It's a construction site next door. Ongoing, 7 days a week. Mm-hmm.
Okay, is that it, Sue?
Yep.
Okay, Georgia, could we get in touch with the zoning board of appeals and see just what the status is on all of this, these complaints? And I think we're hearing two different things. But
Of course, the last I heard, I knew they were continued. Mr. Spear, are you scheduled for the next ZBA meeting in September?
Yes, this coming Monday.
Okay, so it sounds like he's in front of them on Monday, so if this were to be continued to the next meeting, we would have an update after that.
okay, that's good. Okay, are there any other questions, Sue, or comments?
Hi, this is Ina Druin. I live at 36 Wenham Street,
Okay,
and you know, we've lived here a very long time. Just want to support everything that Sue James is saying. Many trees have been cut down. There has been a tremendous amount of activity over there. What is happening now is very different than what was happening just a month ago. So the activity has completely stopped. They've cleaned it up since these complaints have been filed officially. So I just want to make sure that you understand that we are also in agreement with what Sue James is saying.
okay. Any other public comment from the abutters? How about, is Alicia ready for us, Chelsea?
Excuse me, Lisa Rizzo would like to also say something?
Okay, go ahead.
Hi, thank you. My name's Lisa Rizzo. I live at 37 Wenham Street. I've been here for 28 years, and our yards are open in the back, so you're able to come out on your deck or your yard and see the space. And in 28 years, I've never been able to see through the conservation land to the property at 55, and I now can. And the leaves haven't even come off the trees yet. I think Mr. James, Kevin, had spoken several times over the past year and a half to try and get Mr. Spear's attention about these matters, and he got nowhere, which is why we did file a complaint. We're a very nice neighborhood, and we really do get along. It's just that we would like this to be addressed because it isn't a figment of our imagination. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you. Okay, how about that phone call, Georgia? Is Alicia ready?
So it turns out she was getting phone calls for a separate public hearing, so no phone calls for Conservation Commission.
Okay. Okay, just noted that the neighbors' complaints, I think, are more zoning issues. And I'm going to let's see what the ZBA has to say at their Monday meeting. And I'm proposing that we go along and ask Mr. Spear to have the site surveyed so we know what the wetlands delineation is. And I think it would be good for us to visit the site at some point. That being said, I'm just going to leave it open for everyone. Just jump in if there's any further comments.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, if I could just, I agree that some of the complaints addressed really have to do with the extent of the use variance, whether you've exceeded the use, but that's for the planning board to decide. But to the extent that the neighbors are saying trees are being removed, if they're in the buffer zone, that's our That's our issue, so.
Right, you're right.
Thank you.
But we have to know what the buffer zone is, right?
Right, absolutely.
Okay. Anyone else have any further comment?
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
it may be advantageous if Mr. Spear, if you've already had that survey scheduled, or if you've already signed with someone, depending on how fast it is, it may be nice to have the wetland already flagged for when the commission does go out there. That way we can really get a reference of where the activity is in relation to the edge of wetlands. So if you're able to kind of get that scheduled, I think as soon as possible, that way we can get, we could do the site visit after, but that's up to the commission.
I will let you know as soon as possible. I've already spoken to him, and I told him I'd get back to him after this meeting to set something up.
Okay.
It's Hancock Associates up on Center Street. I'm sure you
Good.
know. So.
Yeah.
And just ask them if they'd be willing to come in front of us and just show us the results of their survey.
Okay.
Please.
Can anybody hear me?
I'm sorry?
Oh, now you can hear me.
Yes, we can.
Attorney Arvanitis, I've been watching this meeting since the beginning. And I don't know why. I just downloaded WebEx tonight for the first time, but I can see all of you. I've heard all of you. And when you asked me, Mr. Chairman, to make a comment or explain the history and the background, I tried to do so. And it was very frustrating that I couldn't be seen or heard. And I think I can't really add anything other than to say that as a result of the ZBA hearing, which I attended on the 14th, Mr. Spear has, with the consent of the, and I won't say agreement of the building inspector, but the building inspector at that hearing indicated what he would like to see done, bringing the property into compliance with the 1975 use variance. And Mark agreed to do those things, which were the variance allows storage behind the barn, if you will, in an area 2.5 times the square footage of the interior, which is that 2.5 times comes to 15,200 square feet. Behind the barn is being interpreted as directly behind the barn. If you draw a line on either side straight back, that's behind the barn, and substantially now that's all been done. And Mark can speak to this. I think the area where the TNT excavators, materials and equipment are now being stored is all on impervious, asphalt, which has been there for a long, long time. And Mark can speak to that if I'm incorrect. I don't know about the trees being cut down. I believe Mr. Spear, when he says that he hasn't done it, is not aware of anyone else having done it, that there was one of his renters, a tree, I think it's North Shore tree experts, which have left in the last couple of weeks, which would go out and cut some trees on off-site, somebody's property or somewhere else, and they would bring them back to process them or do something with them before they ultimately dispose of them elsewhere, and they would be brought back to the property behind Mr. Spear's barn. Maybe that's what some people have observed. I'd be very interested to see whether or not there's evidence of active tree cutting up there. But in any event, we hope and expect that we will be able to satisfy the ZBA, if not completely, that we're almost there with everything being moved directly behind the barn, all materials and equipment, either behind the barn into a 15,200 square foot area, which is more than we're using, or inside the barn, which is now what Agway is doing. And we think we're going to be able to satisfy them and need to go no further with that. Whether or not there's going to be an interpretation by an abutter, I think Mr. James feels that he's got a viewpoint as to what the variance allows that may be different from what we think or what the ZBA thinks. That'll play itself out. There is what I think is a riprap wall. Maybe if anybody's been out to the site, at the very back of the site where this activity that we've been discussing tonight was occurring, there is a riprap type wall, and there's some boulders or rock as part of that wall on top that you may want to have something done with. There is also a stone wall type corral which has a residual crushed stone in it in that general area, which may or may not be within the buffer. And we're gonna have it mapped as we think it's a good idea anyway, so we know in the future, what can be done and where in compliance with the use variance. And whatever has to be done, according to your viewpoint, to remove anything else that needs to be removed, we would ask for an order of conditions to do that if it turns out that there's anything remaining in the buffer area. That's all I have to say.
Okay, that's a little bit down the road. We have to delineate the wetlands, and then we'd have to ask you for a notice of intent based on what the results are there.
Of course.
I have a question for Georgia. Which tree was taken down, supposedly? There was a complaint, a tree being taken down. Where was that?
So I'm not sure exactly which tree it was. The video that the commission received was the sound of chainsaws coming from an abutter showing the property. Not sure which exact tree it was.
I exactly know what you're talking about. There was a tree being taken down, not on my property. It was on my neighbor's property.
And which number is that?
At 41 Wenham Street. The police showed up, and a lot of people get the addresses mixed up. They think all these barns are one property when they're not. That tree, they cut a couple branches off it because the tree's dead. Because they put a shed behind it and they didn't want it to fall in the shed. They thought, well, let's cut a couple branches down so it won't topple on the shed. That tree is actually on 41. It actually may be on town property, actually. But that is not on my property. I just want to state that.
Don't get mad. Hi, it is on your property, or was, and it was very much alive.
Oh my God. All right. Georgia, if you'd like to come down, my cousins had the property surveyed and his mark is out there, and I can show you the tree. That's fine.
I think on the site visit, the commission can add that to their scope of review.
Right.
Thank you.
Yeah,
if it's applicable to the project.
Let's keep things moving. So Mark, you're going to get someone to come out and delineate the wetlands and have them come before us at our next meeting or sometime in the future meetings.
Yes.
And I guess another thing, did I hear that there were piles of material being stored on site somewhere?
Just stone. Rocks.
Okay, just crushed stone, no loam, no bark mulch.
No, just crushed stone and some bigger rocks, because the excavating company makes rock walls.
Okay, we just do not want any kind of runoff into the wetland. So I would ask you to cover that if there's anything, organic.
Everything is up against the barn now.
Okay.
And
okay, so we're going to ask for a delineation of the wetlands, and we'd like to schedule a site visit at some point. Georgia, should we wait till after the delineation has been done?
Yeah, and what I do suggest, just as a safeguard, is maybe request the as-built by the next meeting in October. That way we have a safeguard to bring Mr. Spear back in, and if for some reason the survey is not done by then, we can continue that to the next meeting.
As-built from what? From the...
Or sorry, a survey. Sorry, not an as-built. Just a story. I would say make it a condition he needs to provide that by the October 8th meeting. If he has it done in 4 days, then I can coordinate emails with the commission to do a site visit.
Okay.
Does that work?
Is that agreeable, Mark?
I believe so.
Okay, good.
Once I get it set with the Hancock, I'll let Georgia know when they're going to come out.
Okay, good.
All right.
Well, thanks for working with us. We want to get this to a good conclusion.
Right.
This technically is not a hearing. Is that right, Georgia?
It is not. But you could make a motion into the record just of what you're requesting from Mr. Spear and the date or the time in the meeting.
Okay. Is one of the members willing to make that motion and we'll vote on it?
Yeah, I'll move that we enter into the record this informal discussion as to the alleged violations at 55 Wenham Street, and include in that that the applicant, the homeowner has agreed to delineate the wetland to allow us to come onto the property and do a site visit.
Okay, that sounds good. Is there a second to that motion?
I'll second that.
Okay, all in favor? Vanessa?
Yes.
Mike Splain?
Aye.
Ann?
Yes.
Chelsea?
Yes.
And Peter Wilson, yes. All right, so if everything goes to plan, we will see you folks again at our next meeting, which is on October the 8th. Is that the correct date, Georgia? Okay, good. Okay, good. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, next up on the agenda is minutes. I think Georgia said that Alicia would have some comment on that.
Yes, so now that we're virtual, I am manning phones, so I am not typing during the meetings. So I have to re-watch each of the meetings, which can be a little grueling, and as you know, our past meetings have been long ones. So I'm trying to get through them. I promise to have them to you early next week. I will send you the link so that you have plenty of time to go through them before the next meeting.
Okay, good. Is there any chance of like subcontracting that? Can the town afford to do that?
Hi, Peter. We'll look into it.
Okay, just a thought. I mean, there's plenty of people out there looking for work, so.
Oh yeah,
That's
no,
a good thought. That's a
an
good thought, Mr. Chair.
excellent thought.
Okay, Georgia, I'm just gonna switch this old and new business a little bit. And we've had some discussion on having our meetings in person or virtual. But I just want to poll the members to see just what their feelings are. And if anyone does not want to do it in person, please say so, and we'll continue virtually. I think if this is my opinion, and if someone disagrees with me, please let me know. If we're unanimous that we'd want to have in-person meetings, we could press the staff to go in that direction. But if anyone objects to not meeting in person, we'll just continue the way we are. So I guess I'll just open it to comments. I'll start with Mike.
Yeah, well, I don't have a problem, but I'm wondering how we would then address the public input. If we're doing in-person meetings, would it be a blend of in-person meetings and these WebEx meetings for the public?
That's a good question. I know that some boards are having in-person meetings, so I'm for sure that they're having in-person public comment and participation.
So,
Yeah, David, I was going to pass it to you because I know you've had experience with this discussion with the planning board.
Yeah, so just really quick with the hybrid meeting style, which is what we deemed it, meaning, you might have 2 members publicly, in a physical location and 3 somewhere else, with the public able to chime in from a computer and or in person. Technologically, I guess is not capable for us to do that. I think it's limitations both on broadcast and also with our app. So whichever model you choose, it would either have to be fully in person with a full public audience or fully remote.
Yeah.
So just
Well,
for what it's worth.
David, could I just say that when we did that land use summit at the middle school, I mean, that was everybody in person and they were spaced out, and there was probably, was there 40 people there?
I don't think it was quite that many, but yeah, there was public there, or, well, I should say volunteers.
Yeah. And if we did that, where would we do the meetings?
So that kind of is more of one of the logistical things that's a bit tougher on our end. We would try to anticipate whether a certain item would be particularly controversial. I mean, to be fair, most meetings are not that controversial. They could be handled in a multi-purpose room, but should something come up where there wasn't a large amount of people who wanted to attend, which I think we get more of that on the planning board side, we would have to try to go to the high school, I think, is the only location large enough, especially with the weather. I mean, if it were summer and we could just go outside, that's a possibility, but.
Well, based on your comments, I'm in favor of in-person meetings.
Okay, thanks, Mike. Ann, what do you think?
I'm very comfortable online. I have no problem with that. So, I mean, that's personally the way I feel, actually the way I've adapted to it. Let's face it, it's the only way I've had these meetings other than the in-person ones that I went to. And
Okay.
when we had those in-person meetings, we had crowds. So if we were going to do an in-person meeting, would we have people get tickets in advance and we'd only have X number of people permitted at the meeting? There might be more logistics to that kind of meeting.
Yeah, I think, sorry, I don't mean to jump in. I'd like to hear your comments too. We've run up against that. Other communities, I should say, have tried something like that. I'm pretty sure the Attorney General is going to deem that an open meeting law violation if we limit the participants.
Oh, sure.
So I know it's out there. It hasn't happened in Danvers, but it's an issue.
Okay, so you're comfortable, you'd prefer to continue in the virtual format?
I think we'd be doing a lot of gyrations to have a in-person meeting. That's my opinion, but I could.
Okay, no, that's fine. That's I'm just trying to find out how people are thinking.
Yeah.
Chelsea, what do you think?
Honestly, I think I prefer the virtual meetings as well. I'm kind of getting used to it at this point, and to shake it up again and have to readjust to a whole nother like situation, it just seems like more of a hassle for not a whole lot of payoff. As much as I miss seeing you guys in person, you know, there is still a risk that I'd rather avoid. Yeah, no, if it's between the two, I'd rather stay virtual, to be honest.
Okay, that's fine. And Vanessa, what do you think?
I'm comfortable staying online as well. I think I'm just used to it because I'm, doing it for work and doing it for this. And furthermore, my daughter is back at daycare, so you guys might not want to be around me because she's around a lot of other kids, little kids, 3 days a week. So I'm conscious of that, and I don't want to inadvertently be patient zero among the commission.
Okay. All right. That being said, I guess, Georgia, I think we'll just continue with our virtual meetings. I mean, there's Mike and myself that would like to do it, but I want to respect the other people's opinions, and we've gotten good at this, so I guess we'll just continue. And for the last meeting, there was some frustration by one of the participants, but we got it to work for him, so we're going to continue the way that we have been. Okay.
Can I just chime in? If we run into that too again with like technical difficulties, we can always continue. I feel like we have to make a really good effort to make sure everybody that wants to be heard can be, and if they're running into technical difficulties, they can, in between meetings, submit it in writing or convey it through Georgia. But as long as we make a really good effort to make sure everybody that wants to be heard can be, and then barring any technical difficulties, we could just continue as needed. We don't have to decide on something if we feel like all the public comments couldn't be properly addressed at that meeting.
Right. And that's what we did with the airport. So that's a good
Exactly.
point. Well said. Yeah. Okay, so that I think that issue has been put to bed. All right, so now I'm going to turn it over to Georgia and Dave so they can continue with their presentation on the general and zoning bylaw language changes.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. So can everyone see my screen again?
See it.
Yay. All right. So I'm going to start out, and then David's going to jump in at the end and give an overview, as you see at the end, of the cluster bylaw changes we've been working on. So the recap, we went over at the initial meeting last time, going over the proposed changes. Everyone got a copy of that. So we'll give another overview of that, and the members had some great edits to add to the existing updates, so we've provided those. And we'll also do an intro on some of the regulation updates that we'll be providing now that we have these bylaw changes. And as I just mentioned, David's going to give an overview on the cluster bylaw. Again, nothing the commission needs to, approve per se, but it is relative to conservation. I think having the board support, comments, input would be very helpful. So for our bylaw changes, as we've discussed, there's really some big items and changes. As I have here, the first line I put in the memo, you guys have seen one of our bigger overall changes to the process is we now have a new date for special town meeting. So originally this was slated for the special town meeting scheduled in November. A new special town meeting has been created to accommodate a citizens petition. Based on that, we've decided to move some articles that were slated for the 14th over to the 26th. So the wetlands bylaw will now be brought forth at the October 26th special town meeting. It's not too much of a change to the schedule we had. I think with the reviews we've been doing on this bylaw, we'll have tonight and then up until the next meeting as well to do more review of the bylaw if the commission had any more questions. So that change really doesn't change too much timeline wise. So giving a review of what we discussed last time, our big changes to the bylaw, the jurisdiction and activities. So that's where we added protecting vernal pools, isolated wetlands, and then also some language about docks and piers, which we'll see reflected in the regulations. And then another big change was increasing our individual restricted buffer zones to 35 and 50. And then I'd written minor changes. So again, that was updates to definitions, process for exemptions, emergencies, minor stuff like that that really just needed an overhaul. So going into what's been edited based on our first round of comments, Anne had pointed out a great recommendation that the original language we had proposed updating was to suggest for the minor project permits that applicants fill out a form. There was a suggestion to make it a requirement. That way we have a better streamlined process of making sure that if people are filing, they're required to meet our standards that we list in the bylaw. So that suggestion was great, and I actually created this form you can see here on the right. So this is kind of just a mock-up, but this is what the minor project permit application would look like. And in the process that we've defined in the bylaw, and I actually added a little bit more language to make it more clear that if you are a minor project, one of these here, and you meet the performance standards, you can provide erosion control, you're 50 feet away, and you're going to loam and seed after you do your activity, if that's applicable, then you do not need to go in front of the commission, and that process will be done at staff approval. So that was one of our really big changes and something that we tweaked based on 2 weeks ago, the feedback you guys provided. Yes, 2 weeks ago. And I do have one note here, and again, not something that needs to be decided tonight because this is something we can define in the regulations, but having a fee for those minor projects. So right now we usually see these come in under RDAs, which are $50 of the town. So it's dependent on if the commission wanted to require anything. Staff and I have discussed, David and I, based on the increased staff time it would take to review these, possibly do site visits, review maps, a little bit more time for staff-wise, so a fee between 50 and 100 seems appropriate. So those are kind of the minor details that the commission, we can discuss later for the regulations for those details. And then speaking of the regulations, so as I just had mentioned before, the bylaw changes, we have that great base, but those are really the 4 big major ones we're adding, the new buffers, the new jurisdiction areas we want to protect. So if those are added and adopted at town meeting on the 26th, then it's important that the commission update their regulations to reflect the new bylaws that were adopted. And while we're there updating, there are some components that are a little bit outdated and can kind of be vamped up. I don't know if this is big enough for you guys to see, but it does note the last time the regulations were updated was 2003, and they've been updated about 4 times, and these were adopted in 1999. So again, a quick overview: anything that changes in the bylaw has to be approved by town meeting. Anything that changes in the regulations is changed by the commission at one of their hearings. And I just, a good example is in the bylaw, it says, if you affect any area in our resource, you have to file an application, period. The regulations say how many copies of the application you need to provide, when it needs to be sent in by, what needs to be shown on the plan. So that's where you got your meat is in the regulations, and kind of our bones is the bylaw. And does anyone have any questions while I'm kind of sailing through the beginning part?
Yeah, I do. Maybe for David. David, you just touch on the process. I mean, do we have to vote as a board on these changes before they go to town meeting? I mean, do we have to say we're in favor of these changes?
Yeah, thank you for bringing that up, Mr. Splain. So different from the zoning bylaw, which I think we might have discussed a little bit ago, the zoning bylaw has a pretty stringent public process, which includes a series of public hearings that have to happen on the run up to town meeting to bring a bylaw forward. And then the planning board has to write an official report to town meeting itself. For general bylaws, which is where the wetlands bylaw is housed, we don't need to do that. However, I think Georgia and I have been viewing this number of meetings that we've had going over this as our public hearings, as they were, even though they're technically public meetings for this process. So there isn't anything outlined specifically at the state level that says what you have to do. It's theoretically, you could just show up with a bylaw to get it on the warrant for town meeting and then go to town meeting. I think we wanted to have more of an open discussion on it, so that's why we've been doing it this way. But at the end of this, the Conservation Commission, through the staff, we can put this together, can write a recommendation report to town meeting. Obviously, you all will review it, add any comments or edits that you have, and we should be good to go from there.
Would that require the chairman to present something to town meeting? I know when I was chairman of the planning board, we had to sort of present something, or, we say we were in favor, so is it similar to that?
The chair wouldn't have to present anything at town meeting. Generally, the way it works here in Danvers, and every town's a little bit different, is staff would do presentations similar to this to the Finance Committee and the Board of Selectmen prior to town meeting. And then at town meeting, generally either the chair of the Board of Selectmen or the town manager usually takes the helm and answers any questions.
Thank you.
So no formal PowerPoint or anything like that needed.
It's a good thing, because I'll be in a hospital bed on at the town meeting.
Yeah, we heard that.
Okay, any more questions? Thank you for that, David. Okay, I think we're good. So going into the regulations, as you guys can see, I actually added a drafted section for docks and piers into the memo to give a snapshot of what it looks like when we change the bylaw, how we put that into the regulations. So the language we have in the bylaw, that updated language, really just says the Conservation Commission monitors and conditions residential dock and pier projects, period. Simple as that. That's the jurisdiction. And then in the regulations, what's been provided to you guys is really those details. So applying that to an overall view of what we're updating in the regulations in the background as staff is the coastal docks and piers section, which you guys received. And I'm anticipating that each meeting, next meeting up until I think right after town meeting, and hopefully after this bylaw is adopted, that we'll be able to provide a new section of the regulations each week, so it's not too overwhelming. We can review each one, provide comment at each hearing, and then hopefully when the time is ready, those regulations will be ready to go at the same time as the bylaw is. So the other big changes, again, we need to add more defining regulations for that 35 and that 50-foot buffer. We limit what we can do in there, but we really need to describe to applicants what is allowed in there, how they need to ask for permission if they do want to work in there, what they should show on a plan, etc. And the rest of that really applies to our other changes. There's been some updates to the definitions to really reflect our new added jurisdictions, new procedure on waivers. So if you do need to do or want to do work in the 35 and 50, we really need to clarify what an applicant needs to do. So that's provide a narrative, an alternative analysis, if you need to put your structure in the 35, why? Is there nowhere else? So right now our regulations really don't require much. And with these updates, it will really allow the applicant to provide more sufficient evidence for us or for the commission in their decision. And as I just touched earlier, the minor project permits, adding some regulatory language for that.
Georgia?
Yeah.
In the coastal docks and piers, I notice all the blank lines for the number of inches and feet. Are we going to be discussing those or tossing a coin?
And what a wonderful segue. So I think that
It's all a setup. You told her to ask that question.
I did, and I'll give you $20 later.
I thought it was 25.
No, but that is a great question, and you will see those blanks. That's where the commission comes in, and if you recall, and you may have actually been around, it came up when we had those coastal projects about 6 months ago. At that time, the commission was really conditioning each project separately with a certain height requirement based on their site. So this is a perfect spot, and as we had said, when we get to updating the regulations, that's the chance for the commission to really make a decision, and that's happening right now. And it doesn't necessarily, the commission doesn't have to choose 18, 24. We don't have to fill in that blank right now. But I would say, I suggest the commission come up with a number before the bylaw is adopted, or be prepared to implement these regulations. So again, it doesn't have to be right now, but this could be a good place to have that discussion for maybe next meeting, the commission being comfortable on a number being proposed.
Well, I think there are a couple of things that we want to be thinking about for these numbers, and have some good basis for them, because we do know about storm surges increasing in intensity. And the coastal towns have been alerted by the trustees' report. And Beverly and Salem are at the bottom of our Danvers River. Beverly's thinking about barriers to the Bass River, and if they did that, that would impact the flow of water to our. So I think when we're talking about sizes like that, I think we need to do a little work on projected or what other people are doing downriver from us too. I think that would be most beneficial to our town if we're anticipating issues like that may be coming in the near future, not in the far future. So that's my comment.
That's great. Thank you.
Georgia, could we ask somebody from Marine Fisheries to give us a presentation or something on any research that they've done to back up the numbers that they have?
Yeah.
Absolutely. I'm happy to know Tay Evans at DMF. That's who I worked with closely when we had that shellfish peer review kind of happen in the background. So she could be a great resource. I'll reach out to her and see if they have any materials or able to even join a meeting and give an overview. Yeah.
Okay.
That would be after this is voted on at town meeting though, right?
Not necessarily. That discussion can happen now, or I'll at least reach out to her now too. And I have a feeling she may reference the small docks and piers guide and the research that they've had, even though that is outdated. That usually is what they reference most. And I guess the studies of why there's 18 inches and 30 inches in shellfish may still apply, even though they were a while ago, but it would be nice to have an explanation, like you would say, of that science. So, but I envision, if we have time, Peter, I envision that could be something we could get answers to prior to town meeting, or at least hopefully in October, November, so we can adopt them.
Yep, okay.
And the only other thing that came up once that I found, we were kind of struggling with a little bit was the height over salt marsh. Is there some little salt marsh left that we think it's too like niche to even go, like to be called out specially in the regulations, or do you think it's worth having a standard?
I don't think there's any harm in having a standard, and I think if anything that can protect what we do have, maybe even promote more growth. So I will definitely add that, and I can look back because I think we had talked about a 2.5 to 1 instead of a 1 to 1 or a 1.5 to 1.
Yeah, 2.5 to 1 seems somewhat familiar to me too, but it was a long time ago.
Yep. So I can add that. That's a great suggestion. Okay. Was there anything that jumped out to anyone else, regulation-wise, or anything? Any other comments for that section? And again, this doesn't have to be the last time. I think for the next meeting on the 8th, I'll provide the section on minor project permits in the regulations, and we can overview that and again touch back on this if the commission members had any more thoughts after this discussion. So with that, that was our bylaw regulation kind of updates to date. And if we had no questions on that, I was gonna.
Well, just one, Georgia, we're putting a fixed number on Peel Width, aren't we?
Yes, I had put in there 4 feet.
Right.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, that's what I thought. I want to make sure. Yeah.
Oh, and I also, I had put it in the memo, but I do want to just note to the public as well, for people that are watching, the harbor master is reviewing these for his comment. So he did say these look great initially, but he really wanted to kind of pick through them. So if he has comments on these, we'll have those for the next meeting as well. Okay. So David, I'll pass it off to you if that's good, if you're
Sure.
there and ready.
I'm awake.
I still have control of the.
That's okay. We could do it old school. I'll just say slide. Thank you, Georgia, for turning it over. As Georgia had mentioned too, while this is a zoning bylaw, which is out of your jurisdiction, there's a component of the cluster development section that you may play a critical role in. And obviously, we'd love to have your support if you deem it worthy. So with that being said, I'll just start by describing this fairly quickly as an overhaul of the existing bylaw. The bylaw we have on the books right now for clustered development, which, by the way, short segue, is essentially a clustering of homes, generally single-family homes, closer together to allow conservation of more open space on a conventional development site than would otherwise be there. So normally, if you have a conventional subdivision, most of, if not the entirety of the site is cleared, generally, but for some wetlands areas, to allow for yards and lots. And also, there's a machinery needed to be brought in, plus some bank concerns if they're getting mortgages or loans. That being said, a cluster bylaw would allow the houses to be tighter together, closer to the right-of-way, meaning the road, and allow for some conservation area, meaning of trees and open land or farmland, basically space preservation that doesn't get touched during the construction project. So Georgia's been working pretty diligently on this. I've kind of dabbled in it a bit, where we have in the book basically 2 options should you choose to go to a cluster development typology. And I did some models just to make sure it was physically possible to do what we came up with. So this site is just a parcel or 2 in town that I mocked up as a conventional development, just to show you all what it could look like potentially if it were a conventional subdivision. So this is a waiverless conventional subdivision plan, meaning there's very little discretion that the planning board has or say over what happens on the site. That's not to say it's good nor bad, it just is. So if you come in and you can meet the geometry of the roadway and of the lots, pretty much you're approved de facto, and as long as there's no environmental constraints on a site, you're pretty much good to go with the planning board's consent. So if, Georgia, if you can go slide ahead. So this is a mock-up of what could be done under the clustering bylaw that we're proposing. So this is the same site. It's in the residential 3 zone, which is our largest zoning lot for residential development. This essentially allows a reduction in lot size and some other dimensional relief that would cluster the houses closer to the right-of-way on the left-hand side. That being said, it doesn't have to be the left. That's just what I picked because it was easy enough to draw. All the green on the right-hand side would be space saved, so the large green area would be saved, as well as the buffering area around the perimeter of the entirety of the site. So Georgia did a really good job putting together some regulations to allow for 25 feet of buffering around the entire perimeter with some pretty dense vegetative screening. So, you know, should the neighbors or anybody in the general area have a concern about, you wouldn't say density in terms of added number of units, but proximity of the homes to each other, it could be screened quite heavily and would allow for some breakup of that visual impact. So,
Hey, David, could I interrupt for a sec?
Sure.
Yeah, I had familiarity with cluster because I lived in one, and the way they were designed, and the one I'm looking at now, all the green area is all to one side, where the cluster zone I think we have now, that all the lots have to touch the green space. Is that not going to happen in the idea you envision?
So the one we have on the books now allows you to have non-contiguous open space as well. So while all of these lots, essentially they at least touch buffering area, meaning that green space all around the perimeter, or some of them back up to the larger portion of open space, they'll all touch some green space. However, I understand what you're saying, Mike, in that each lot had to be adjacent directly to the conservation restricted space, essentially. So if we did that, we'd end up with a model like what we have now, where the open space would most likely be non-contiguous. So the parcels of open space themselves could be broken up into smaller portions, which I think we were thinking from a conservation standpoint, the biggest environmental impact would be to keep the largest contiguous parcel we possibly could on site. Yeah. So that was kind of the reasoning behind that. So while each home doesn't directly abut the CR, the conservation restricted area, they would have access either through that screening area or from a trailhead, as you'll see in the next slide.
Yeah. That would be just passive. David, that would just be passive space, passive area.
We did write it in the provisions. So if at the outset of this, whoever is doing the development wanted to set aside land for, I think we have an orchard, different types of apiaries, other types of farming and community gardens and things like that. And Georgia can jump in because I know she had a more extensive list than that. But there was, I guess you wouldn't call it active, meaning a baseball field, but more active than completely leaving the land alone on a portion.
Could you have like victory gardens like they had on the Endicott or on?
Yeah, no, that would be entirely
yeah.
That would be entirely appropriate to have on some portion of the site. Yeah.
Okay. Dave, could we go back one slide for a second, please?
Yep.
So is this a cluster development as well? Because there's no open space in this. It's
this
not.
This one is not. So that was the comparison. So
that's the same parcel of land, right?
Right.
Correct.
Yeah. Right. So this would just be a typical subdivision.
Correct.
Yeah. So this is typical, and then this is what it would be under the cluster.
Okay.
And it's interesting. It's the same area, isn't it, Georgia? The same square footage, but you've been able to put a lot more green space in by clustering.
Exactly. Yep.
Yeah.
No.
Same number of homes too. So it's not by allowing this provision we're allowing more homes.
Okay, it's not in our purview, but I'm just going to ask the question anyways. You know, with Choate Farm, they was set up as a cluster development, and it was supposed to be smaller homes, and then it was sold to another developer, and he just said, "No, I want to build the bigger homes."
Yeah.
Would they still be able to do that under this new proposal?
So we are not proposing size limitations on the homes. However, this permit is a discretionary permit, so it's called a special permit to the planning board. So should they want to impose limitations on the size of the homes, they could do that.
They can.
I've worked in many communities that specifically limit the size of homes to a certain number. I don't think we're quite there yet in Danvers. I think that would certainly threaten the passage of this bylaw. I'll say that. I don't think we'd be very successful.
Now, as far as, are you done, Peter?
Well, yeah, just quick follow-up. So,
All right.
just so I understand, the limit on the size of the homes being built would be up to the planning board and not part of the bylaw.
Correct. It's not in the bylaw. However, Georgia, if you just go back to the slide, the previous one. So almost de facto, if you think about it, I would never promise this, but you could say that with the larger lots, you could clearly have a larger home, just given you have more area to build it. So
Right.
again, we can't promise smaller units. However, it's just the physical layout of the house most likely would result in smaller homes, but can't promise anything.
Okay. That's good. Thanks.
Sure. Sorry, George.
I started to say, if we could put the next slide back up with the green space. Now, as far as conservation's jurisdiction, where would our buffer zones apply all around the entire perimeter, or are they actual buffers that would be regulated by our bylaw?
They wouldn't be regulated by your bylaw unless there was wetlands on the site. So say this site had wetlands somewhere on it, all of your normal boundaries would apply. The buffer area that I'm discussing, the green area here, the screening, would need to stay in perpetuity for the lifetime of the development.
Okay.
So yeah, that would be in there. It's under planning board jurisdiction, but they would need to stay permanently.
And there may not be any wetland there. And
correct. Right.
But if there were, like on West Street, there were large detention pond areas. You know what I'm talking about, David?
Yep, I do.
Yeah. Would there be that sort of thing?
We're allowing for some stormwater. Sorry, Georgia, did you want to go ahead?
No, go ahead. Yep.
We're allowing for some stormwater infrastructure to occur in some of the open space area, given that I don't think, given current stormwater standards, you'd be able to infiltrate on the portion that's left. However, I think we would strongly encourage it to be underground. So the detention ponds you're talking about are all surface ponds, and they're fenced in and they're not accessible. I think we'd be certainly looking at going forward, undergrounding all of that.
Okay.
David, there's one I did want to touch. Mike did have a question about allowable uses on the open space. So under the bylaw, we do require the 50% open space, and the new change to that is 33% of that can be impervious, such as tennis courts, other covered, garden beds. But we do limit the amount of impervious that can occur to the open space.
Well, it could be a playground.
Yes, it could have a recreational designation on it. David, and if you want to add to that, David.
No, I was going to say, and that said too, something like an orchard or garden wouldn't necessarily be considered pervious entirely either. So some of that could be taken up just simply by those things. So, okay, if you want to go ahead, Georgia. So on this next slide, what we're showing here is a development, same parcel of land again, as Peter said, set up to not be, quote, lotted out, meaning it wouldn't be individual lots. It would just be a group of homes that would be governed under an association of some sort. So while we can't regulate ownership or governance type at the local level, this would allow a lot more flexibility, as you can see, in the design of the development, and would result in more open space on the site, as you can see from the last one, being conserved than previous. So with the difference in layout, you get even more flexibility to do differences in roadway. You don't have to have the full right of way, as it wouldn't be maintained by the town. It'd be fire accessible, and the travel lanes would need to meet common engineering best practices, but it would allow a lot more flexibility on where things go on site. So conserving, like I said, even more of the green space that we were looking for. So all that said, where you all come in, and we can go through some more mock-ups after this, a provision that we do have in the bylaw for this open space, it would need to be either under the protection of some entity, meaning an association that wants to protect it, probably associated with these homes or condominiums, or it could be a conservation restriction, which you have jurisdiction over most likely. So CRs or conservation restrictions for these properties could be in front of you should we be successful at town meeting. So I think that may have got lost before and you were wondering, why is he showing me zoning bylaw stuff? But that's where the connection comes in, and that you could end up playing an integral part of this going forward should we be successful this fall. So, Georgia, did you want to add anything, or should we just keep going through?
I did want to add, just for reference, and Peter had brought up Choate Farm, but that's a great example of the open space that is in that development is under a conservation restriction. So they did come in front of the Conservation Commission to talk about that restriction, and that eventually got signed with the Board of Selectmen and went through a further process. But so like David had said, if under this bylaw, this is something that the commission would see in front of them if the applicants did choose a CR process.
All right, if you want to move forward to the next one. So this is just a different scenario under the same bylaw provision with a different layout, with the provision of a small density bonus for the inclusion of basically other public benefits. We wanted to add this to the bylaw to allow for a broadening of scope that most likely may get narrowed down before we get to town meeting. Just if we don't include it now, we can't add it later. So with bylaw proposal changes, you can always have a broader scope and then narrow the scope down as you get closer to town meeting, but you can't expand the scope.
Right.
So that's what we're looking at here. This would allow for a different layout of the roadway, but again, more access to green space than the conventional subdivision by a wide margin.
Is this parcel of land just, are you just showing this as an example, or is this
just an example?
Here?
No, nothing in the works. I just picked any random large parcel in town, and also I should note it doesn't show environmental constraints, or I mean there could be wetlands here. We don't know. It was just a.
David, there's a parcel for sale on North Street. It's about 10 acres for about.
That's what we're looking at, Mike.
And that's what we're looking at, isn't it?
Mike, it looks pretty similar to the one on the screen. Yeah. And I should note, so it is that parcel. There's a small portion of land actually right on North Street that the town owns. I included that in this development. So again, this is just for illustrative purposes. This is nothing that is in the works or could potentially happen. It was a large parcel and I knew about it. So it's the one I picked.
No, yeah. It's a good example. Yeah.
Okay. So Georgia, if you want to jump ahead. This is the definitive subdivision plan for the Whipple Hill development. So I wanted to pick one that you were familiar with. And again, it's another large site in town. And most of the point of this, again, is not to say one development type is good nor bad. We're just trying to show you what could be a possibility should we go forward. So this was 20 homes, conventional subdivision, and they had multiple filings with the Conservation Commission, as I think most of you are aware. Georgia, if you go to the next one. So this was a cluster for the same site that actually was filed under the existing bylaw. So there's, again, nothing wrong with this submission. One thing to note, though, the buffering requirement that I was mentioning on the last slide, that 25-foot buffer, isn't really included here. There is a buffer around the edge of the property, but it's a lot more narrow than what we were requiring because, again, the current bylaw only requires a narrow buffer. So we'd like to kind of beef that up a little bit and make that a bigger feature on site. So again, with this, if this had passed, there'd still be filings with the Conservation Commission. Obviously, they're in the 100-foot zone, but they would have been out of the stream crossing there. So same number of homes, same as the conventional, just closer together on site. Georgia, if you want to jump ahead one. So this is a mock-up I did based off of that same plan. One thing to note, I was able to shorten the lengths of the right-of-ways by about 300 feet from the one that was actually submitted. So there's a lot more green space that would now abut the existing cemetery to the south, as well as the town-owned space to the, I guess you'd call it, southwest, as well as Clark Farm. So again, same number of homes, just less impervious surface, more conservation of open space and green space. But I did want to show you a site that you may have been more familiar with, just so you could see if our proposal is successful, what it would look like, or what it could look like. And again, this is what it would be if the development weren't separated out into separate lots. So allowing for more flexibility to design, and you'll notice a lot more of that yellow space. Technically, that isn't required under the bylaw, so they would have already met their 50% open space requirement. But as you can see, there's still actually a lot of just open space that could be used for any number of things. I mean, it could be something like parking, but it could be playgrounds, it could be a gazebo, community meeting space, whatever the association decides and the developer decides to come up with. So
Dave, this particular option, this is like a homeowners association, is that right?
It could be that. It could be a condominium association. There are other types of governance structures that could be allowed. So I think, like I had mentioned, at the local level, we can't tell the developer what type of governance structure they want to set up for the development.
My question is more along the lines is the land, there's no lots delineated. It's all the land is owned by the association.
Yep, it's all some sort of common ownership that some entity or somebody owns. Yeah.
Okay.
It's like a cooperative in a sense.
Right.
Where you have a share. Yeah.
In a sense, not that different. Yeah, it could be set up similar to that as well. Yeah. So George, if you want to jump ahead. And again, this would be with the density bonus that I discussed. There's more units, there could be more public trade-off, and that's kind of I guess you'd call it a dance that the applicant would have to do with the planning board on whether or not the planning board feels that they satisfied public benefit necessary to allow for the increased density. But pretty much the same.
That plant has a smile.
It does. I didn't notice that, but
it's a happy plan.
Did not notice that, but yeah. So if you want to jump ahead one, so we did want to. So those were both two. I mean, for Danvers, fairly large sites. You know, they're not 250 homes or anything, but those are not the typical size of development we have in town. So we wanted to do a smaller site. So this is a site in the residential 2 zone. It's just 4 acres, but this was the layout it could potentially look like as a conventional subdivision. Georgia, if you want to go ahead. This would be a potential for the lotted out development. So again, smaller lots, not a diminishing of the space that's potentially developed on the site, just a clustering of the homes closer together with open space being saved. And again, this is
if I can interrupt, what would, for example, make that attractive to a developer? So he has this parcel and he has to think about, should I go conventional or cluster? And he has the right to choose that, I guess. So is there an economic advantage to him?
Yeah, there would be. So there's a couple things at play there. I mean, the site could have significant environmental constraints, meaning like, for instance, on this site, that whole back half I'm showing in green might just be a really steep slope. There's nothing stopping them from bringing that down to grade. However, clearly there's an increased cost to that. They'd probably have to erect retaining walls, and those aren't cheap. So a lot more earthwork involved. And usually also there's a lot more work involved in the right-of-way. So if you can shorten up the road length, that's that much more road that you don't have to put sewer and water infrastructure under. You don't have to pave. There's, curbing isn't cheap if you're going with granite curbing. So there's cost savings on utilities, infrastructure, and then earthworks. So that's kind of the trade-off there. The other part of it is there could be other environmental constraints that, they might say, yeah, I could ask the Conservation Commission to cross those wetlands or to fill those wetlands in or to go over that stream. But to save myself the hassle, if I can just not have to go through that process, it saves me all that much more money. And time too. If they could submit a plan showing that they don't have to be near the wetlands at all, because they're not going to be impacting them, then they wouldn't have to spend the time going through the process with you. Not that we don't like seeing you all, but for them, it's going out of their own way to do that. So.
Okay.
Yep. This is the same site. Again, similarly laid out without any lots. So more open space saved. And this is really just to show, again, physical feasibility on a smaller site. So not that much different from what you already seen. Georgia, if you want to jump ahead. I did just want to show a few sites from other communities that have a similar type of bylaw. So this one's in Concord. On the left is the parcel map. And if you note the road layout. It looks similar on the left there. It's called Black Horse Place, I believe. It's a 15.8 acre site, but they managed to save quite a bit of the open space by clustering the houses together. I will say, the homes, they're not enormous homes, but they certainly aren't tiny homes. And the developer was certainly going for a particular price point. That being said, it's a nice looking neighborhood, and they managed to save a decent amount of open space, all things considered. So if you want to go ahead one slide. This is another site in a coastal community, so they managed to cluster a lot of the homes. Again, these ones certainly are not small homes, and they did not go for bottom dollar. But that was the developer's choice. But the trade-off for clustering close up to the road was they managed to save a large hayfield that abutted salt marsh, and without any impacts to the salt marsh. So in theory, they could have filed to go down to the river. DEP would obviously have a say, as well as the local Concom. However, they didn't even attempt to do that. They just said, we're going to stick up by the road. We're not going to ask to go down there, and all the better for it. And then there's one more slide left. This is another site. This was a historic farm. This was laid out to sort of save that field up there on the left. As you can see, smaller site, but they managed to attach this to an adjacent trail network. So one of the benefits was there was a trail on the left coming from across the street that goes to a larger open space parcel. So now you can walk right across the street, cut through this, and get to, there's a small orchard in the back that actually is town owned. So I mean, while we don't necessarily have that, there would be opportunities to connect other portions of open space that we wouldn't really have unless something like this went forward. So that's my spiel. I wanted to go quickly, but hopefully I answered everything, and we're looking forward to town meeting on this one, hopefully with Concom support.
Good job.
Is this
Thanks.
one on the October 26th?
This is actually at the November 16th one, so it's a little later.
Good. Yeah, I think as a conservation commission, we'd like to see these go forward just for the saving of the open space, and if they can avoid any kind of wetlands work, we're all for that. So,
Well, the other thing that you're seeing is natural beauty rather than lawns. You build these houses and big houses, and they have lots of lawn, and the lawn is, doesn't do anything really. You get a few bugs in it, but that's about it.
Yeah.
But so if you've got conservation land abutting your neighborhood, great.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that is an improvement in air, improvement in just the environment around your house.
All right. Well, thank you. I think we're at the end of it, so I don't want to belabor the point, but thanks for listening again.
Well, any other comments on the cluster before we move to adjourn?
I think, and I'll also say this isn't the last chance for comment. I mean, if you guys over the weekend or you think of a great idea or comment, feel free to email David and I. This is still, I think, in front of the planning board, David, or it will be going forward soon. So again, just let us know if you guys have any comments, and I'll pass it back to you, Peter.
Okay, well, just one more quick question. Is this on the warrant?
Yes.
It is, yes.
Okay. Guys, I'll be at that town meeting, but I won't be at the October 26th.
Okay.
We'll be thinking about you.
You will. Thanks. I hope it goes as well as the first one did. I guess we're all set. So if someone wants to make a motion to adjourn, we can go from there.
I'll make a motion to adjourn our meeting.
I'll second the motion.
Okay, good. All in favor? Vanessa?
Yes.
Michael?
Aye.
Chelsea?
Yes.
Ann?
Yes.
And Peter? Yes. Okay, all good. Good meeting tonight.
Very good.
And
Good night, everybody.
We'll
Great
see you in 2
job.
weeks. Good night, all.